The Army has outlined modernization priorities, and they've staunchly protected them and supported how they rank. Is that getting a fresh look now? Some analysts out there have wondered, whether the priorities are ranked appropriately to address China, for instance. So are you taking a look at that? Is that on the table?
My own view is one-to-N lists are not very helpful or particularly meaningful. And frankly, when you look at the 6 major modernization areas, there are interdependencies there. So, the network, for example, is foundational across next generation vehicles, future vertical lifts, integrated air and missile defenses. So I think we need to be thinking more about capability sets than a one-to-N ranking of the 6 priority areas.
Very interesting. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing how that fleshes out with your analysis. You also talked in your speech on Monday about how you really are going to take a hard look because you need to make decisions now, across the board, from readiness to modernization to infrastructure. And so with that, is the Army willing to consider a reduced end strength? The chief was adamant earlier this year that no, the end strength it cannot go lower than it is budgeted in fiscal 2022. But budget analysts have said, that it's really only a matter of time before the Army really has to choose between the two. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think the Army really is going to have to make the tough decision between end strength and modernization, or do you believe that the Army will continue to find ways to, keep the end strength where you want it and also pursue your modernization priorities?
Well, I think first of all, we have to think about the fact that, one, we want to see where Congress lands in terms of what the ultimate defense budget is going to be for this year.
Absolutely.
That's an important data point, and I think is also going to be an important data point as the administration looks at future budget requests to Congress. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's too soon to sort of start saying, end strength is on the table, end strength is off the table in that regard. We also, too, have the National Defense Strategy that is still under development. And that, I think, will also be an important data point in terms of assessing what is the demand going to be for Army forces. But as I've said, since my confirmation hearing, I think we do have to look at the sort of 3 big levers of end strength, force structure, modernization. Well, I've now expanded my 3 levers to 4. Mm-hmm. It's really looking at end strength and force structure, modernization, readiness, and how do you balance across those three legs of the stool. Okay. So I want to look holistically and comprehensively and think about how do we make ourselves the best Army that we can be, most relevant to the joint force inside of finite resources. Yeah. So I'm looking at everything.
I'm going to segue into asking you a little bit about the climate strategy, and I know that's going to hopefully come out sometime this fall, and you're in final edits at this point. So I'm hoping you can highlight a little bit of what is going to be part of the strategy. What are some of the main principles and priorities that you're going to lay out there?
Sure. We're looking at, first of all, sort of 4 lines of effort. Everything from helping us think more clearly about how climate change is going to affect us, whether it's our ability to train at home or to operate outside of the country, base resilience, and then really looking at sort of operational energy and sustainment. What we want to do is really put down some tangible goals for where we want to go, consistent with the president's goal of basically having us reduce greenhouse gases by 50% and to have us go to all carbon-free electric sources by 2030. So we want to really layer in some milestones for us to reach as an Army, because I think we can be a leader inside of the department given the scale of the Army itself.
Absolutely. Oh, and what about, operating as climate obviously is changing now? We're looking at operating more seriously in the Arctic. The Army has the Arctic strategy that they rolled out earlier. So how are you approaching just preparing the Army to be able to operate in very extreme temperatures, hot, cold, how are you incorporating that into training and also into the things that you're developing to make it easier on them to operate in those environments?
Well, extreme weather is definitely going to be a factor for us as we look at training. And so one way we're doing that, for example, in the cold weather climates is having our soldiers actually train in Alaska. So instead of necessarily, bringing folks who are stationed in Alaska to Fort Irwin, for example, we're actually going to do some of those major training events in Alaska, or similarly in Hawaii, where it's more of a jungle environment. But on a smaller scale, we're having to deal with it in ways like, for example, when I went to Fort Jackson to visit some of our trainees going through basic training, they basically, because we have so many more days of the year that are very high temperatures, they have these kind of barrels basically filled with ice, and we're now teaching our soldiers to avoid getting overheated by sinking their arms up to their armpits into these ice buckets. And it really helps reduce your core body temperature. But that's just one example, and I think we're going to have to find more and more ways to deal with that kind of a temperature environment.
Broader picture, the 2018 National Defense Strategy identified 5 leading threats: China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and terrorism. Do you believe any of those threats are less serious today than they were in 2018? And I know that you adamantly included this in your speech, that China is the pacing threat. But how are you approaching some of these, the other threats that we've identified in recent years?
Those other threats are absolutely out there, and we're going to have to deal with them. I think what has changed, if you will, is more the realization, I think, of the profound nature of the China challenge.
Yes. Okay.
It's not so much that the other challenges, Russia, Iran, North Korea, terrorist groups, have diminished. It's more of a relative weighting of importance. But we're still going to be focused on deterring Russia, dealing with North Korea, dealing with Iran. That's not going away.
Right. Is there any other observations from AUSA that you'd like to share? Anything else that you've seen or heard that has stuck with you? That you plan to take into your leadership role?
Well, I think first of all, it was just great to have everyone back here in person, even if we all are wearing masks still. Hopefully by next year that will have moved beyond that. But my sense is there's just a great appreciation for everything that the Army has done, and how flexible we've been this year in particular in terms of taking on natural disasters, capital security, Operation Allies Welcome, the evacuation out of Afghanistan. It's been a busy year. And
pandemic management.
Exactly. And I just appreciate all of the positive energy at AUSA for everything that the Army has been doing.